Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, February 17th, 2022. Time for another show and time to drop mask mandates, apparently, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Well, especially for Loudoun County. We get a jump start on all of that. Today's the first day back to school without mask mandates, and it all happened in the space of a couple of hours. The state legislature here, as you know, the House of Delegates control turned over to the Youngkin Fleece Vest Party, and Youngkin, of course, sitting atop that party with his fleece vest, telling everybody that he's a super moderate kind of awesome guy from the suburbs, and he just wants to play a little tennis, and can't we all get along, or whatever, and that's it. So somehow, by the way, Democrats retained control of the state Senate, but it didn't seem to matter for these purposes. And conservadems, I guess, jumped ship and went along with a new law that replaces the old law, which is what saved our bacon in court about a week ago. So they, of course, went and repealed that and removed the ability of local school boards, despite the constitutional prerogative that they hold, removed their ability to put mask mandates in place. And it was scheduled to, I was supposed to originally just repeal the old law, which was supposed to be effective until July 1st of this year. And they passed a law repealing that. But then the governor's office, apparently the legislative process, a little bit weird here in Virginia, added an amendment. There can be an emergency amendment to a bill, and the legislature has to vote on accepting it. They bumped the effective date up to March 1st. Which still isn't today, right? And by the way, I think it looks to me like if I read the voting correctly, the state Senate Democrats all went along with the idea of bumping it up to March 1st. I think Democrats are beginning to, you know how conservative Democrats are. They're running for cover and trying to jump off the, we were the ones who voted to try to slow things down and retain the mask mandates for as long as possible. Once it started to happen, they started to jump ship. I don't know exactly what the dynamics of it were, but since I've been seeing in every morning round of tweets how strong the Democrats are standing in the state Senate there, it was a little bit disappointing, but okay, you're going to win some and lose some. But the one they lost is the one that has my son back in school with mask-optional students and teachers and other staff this morning. I don't know how they're going to react to it. I don't know how many people are going to continue to wear their mask. I know at least one will, but we'll see what the reaction is like. Yeah, so anyway, it was bumped up to March 1st. And then I think as part of the panic, the Loudoun County school system said, well, maybe we ought to get a jump on this stuff. And rather than having angry parents out protesting for the next couple of weeks until March 1st rolls around, because, of course, these people won't take yes for an answer, we'll jump out and start things next week. The beginning of the school week next week is on a Tuesday. We have the President's Day holiday coming up on Monday. They thought, okay, nice orderly transition. However, there was a pending lawsuit in the Loudoun County courts from some parents who, telling you're doing my son irreparable harm by making him wear a mask thing. And I don't know, maybe they have something to say about it. Maybe they're an unusual case. At any rate, the judge was all set to rule on that and then realized, well, things have changed. Now you'll get your way come March 1st anyway. Oh, and as a matter of fact, while we were working on this case today, it turns out that you'll get your wish starting Tuesday. And then the judge said, it doesn't really make any sense to, say, we're going to tell kids that they have to wear a mask or suspend them if they refuse to wear a mask just for the next 2 days. Let's just immediately implement the end of the mask mandate here in Loudoun County, Virginia, by court order, which seems like, why overstep? I don't know why the judge. I mean, I get the point that it doesn't really make any particular sense to just have masking on Thursday and Friday and then come back. But that was what we were going to do. That was going to happen anyway. Judges should, in my opinion, insert themselves only minimally into these things if they don't have to. If the plaintiffs are going to get their wish in 2 days, I say let it lie. But you know how judges are. They insert themselves everywhere. And this one inserted his head up his ass, and now we all have to deal with this for 2 extra days. So chaos in the halls, I assume. Although I guess the good news about the short notice is that there wasn't time to organize parents to come and picket outside the high school and antagonize kids who chose to continue masking, as they've done around the country and elsewhere. My hope is that things remain calm and cool, and it's a pretty low-key kind of a place. The kids have it a lot better than they used to. Back in my day, I figured if this was happening while I was in school, that today would be the day that the football players ran around grabbing masks off of other kids' faces all day. However, as I understand it, the football team at the local high school, not that great. So maybe they're just not going to put themselves out there that way. I guess if the lacrosse players decided to do it, that might be a different story. Anyway, so maybe there's some good news out there. Maybe KN95 masks work pretty good anyway, despite the fact that some people are walking around without masks. I saw somewhere and lost a chart that somebody was estimating how long you could stand around. If your KN95 mask fit pretty good, not total seal, but pretty good, standing around in a crowd of people who were only half masked, how long could you last before you should expect to come down with a case? And you can make it a couple hours, I think. So you could conceivably make it through each school day if you just keep your mask on. But, of course, they'll be eating lunch. And all right, fingers crossed. Greg Dworkin is here. He's a doctor. He reads the news. There's other things to do. We don't have to get too depressed about it. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm a little worried and a little annoyed with our governor. And, I don't want to lay it at their feet, but more than a little annoyed with state Senate Democrats in Virginia. But what can I tell you?
So let's put the best possible spin on it.
All right.
Okay.
Republicans did it. We should be clear about that.
The best possible spin on it is the politicians are simply aware of what's going on around the rest of the country, with everybody saying, okay, the spike is over. It's pretty clear that is, in fact, true, that the spike is over.
Yeah, it sounds like a song.
It doesn't mean that the pandemic's over.
The spike is over. Yes,
but the spike is over.
Yeah. Omicron's
so
not
to react,
the end, necessarily.
Yeah, but to react with that and to decrease the number of things that we have to do makes sense, because that helps to reserve them for when you need it later. And more to the point, you could also make the case that the politicians are protecting their school boards because they saw what happened in San Francisco. Doesn't mean they understood what happened in San Francisco, but in San Francisco, 3 school board members were recalled in a very, very liberal area.
That's
and
true.
The conservatives love to do stuff like that and say, you see, this is all because we should never have closed schools in the first place. The same people that say, you see, now that the spike is receding, it just goes to show that we never should have treated it as a spike, and we should have treated it just like it was before the spike, because the before the spike and the after the spike are exactly the same, and therefore why should you get so worked up about a spike?
And that's actually was a quote from their Delta days. But okay.
Yeah, exactly. So boom, with that going on, it's useful to at least review what actually did happen in San Francisco, because I have no question that what happened there was noticed by every school board in the country.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Okay. So what did happen there? Well, Mother Jones has a nice summary.
All right, Mom.
What pundits don't understand about the San Francisco recall, it was about incompetence. And they give some examples of, like, this is ridiculous.
Oh.
Okay.
They did do some weird things, I must say.
SF schools, San Francisco schools, they close until the fall of 2021, longer than most districts. Okay. And parents started freaking out because there was seemingly little effort to even talk about scenario planning, just Zoom meetings. Okay. And what Zoom meetings with the board focused on was not planning for the pandemic. It was, what do you name your school?
Okay.
Whether or not certain murals in George Washington High School, some of which show Washington standing over black and native peoples being subjugated, should be the focus of what to do about it. But at least at the onset of the debate, most students were probably unaware that the heretofore obscure Work Progress Administration era painter Victor Arnautoff, who depicted Washington overseeing these horrors, did so as a way to critique racism and colonialism, which was a very progressive take for the 1930s.
Well,
but rather than use this as a teaching opportunity, they decided maybe they should be covered at a cost of $815,000, which got the local NAACP, art historians, actor Danny Glover, everybody was really upset, saying basically don't whitewash history. This is a waste of money. So these are among the things I'm reading here that got the locals upset.
All right.
So you had school names,
We didn't do
the
that.
murals, Lowell admissions. Lowell is one of the highest rated public high schools in the country. Admission was determined by merit. Many people inside and outside Lowell community have for decades been advocating various ways to make the school more representative, and this was always going to be a touchy subject.
Oh, yes.
So more broadly, is San Francisco school inequity best solved by rearranging one high school, or would resources and time be better spent on intervention in the elementary and middle schools? Make all the schools better, you know. And so they were going to get rid of academic merit, and that got people upset.
Oh, okay.
And then they
Sure.
rammed through a change without allowing for public input, apparently violating state sunshine provisions and triggering more lawsuits.
Some nice things.
So,
All right.
right, I mean, they were just unhappy with them. Like, what are you doing? You're focusing on all the wrong issues. This is like giving them pandemic money and then having them deep clean the schools and then instead spend the money to cover murals.
Yes.
Right,
Well,
so people got upset
that's
and
probably
recalled them.
what they
What's
did.
that got to do with Virginia and Loudoun? Almost nothing. But school board people were recalled. We saw that. And so, you know, again, I'm giving you the best case scenario. How about we protect our school boards a little bit from this ridiculous stuff by just making it not their problem?
It's a thought. Yeah. All right. I mean, yeah, they're not going to win everything, obviously, in the Senate. It's still a narrow margin that they've got there. And
See, it's not like David is on a ledge, so I'm not like talking you off the ledge. But I'm
Right.
just saying there's a lot of different ways to look at this.
Okay. I mean, that's an interesting possibility, right? You know, take that off the shoulders of the school boards. The
Let
thing
them
I didn't
focus on
really
deep
understand was why the unanimous agreement to bumping up the effective date to March 1st, but
Just make it not an issue.
I guess so. Well, I don't know. There's also, of course, the point at which you go too far, and it's like, well, I don't understand why you're hoping they won't beat you up over something. They'll just make up something terrible about you if you go their way.
That 18-wheeler that's parked in front of the
Yeah.
Board of Ed honking isn't just going to go away because you did this.
Right. So, and you can't tow it away because they're putting no trespassing signs in their windows because they're
Right,
sovereign
but-
citizens.
Yeah, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay. What were you saying?
I was
I
saying,
missed
you
the
know,
whole thing.
maybe there are some things that are worth, going to the well on, and there are some things that are saying, fine, let's just do this and move on.
Well, my guess is in the end, personally in the household, I think the mask's going to do us some good, and there's a pretty good chance that other kids will get sick, and maybe we won't.
Yeah, so we do have some things to talk about, but
All right.
since you brought it up, let's talk about some pandemic stuff here.
All right. Well, we are. So
First of
do
all,
more.
Yeah,
Yes.
we are. I found one of the many, many, many signs that talk about how long you can wear your mask,
Okay.
right?
There it is.
If the receiver, that would be the person,
Okay.
is wearing
With the
a N95, and the source is wearing nothing, you have 2.5 hours. That was your question.
Okay.
But if you
yeah.
both wear one, you got 25 hours to
That's-
be exposed
yeah.
without wearing it.
That's much better. It's
It is much better. It's like all day of school.
10 times longer. Yeah. So 2.5 hours. Well,
Right? If you're wearing an N95 and the other person's wearing a surgical mask and they're sick and you're trying to protect yourself, you got 5 hours. That's almost the whole school day.
Yeah.
So that's the
Ooh, that
thinking
just
behind
occurred to
the why do you put masks in school, but you don't necessarily say they have to be N95s. Well, you can wear an N95 and you're basically protected all day.
Okay. Well, you should. And Yeah, it occurs to me what I think the practical effect of something like this. This is interesting. The players in this debate insisting, well, they're conflating school closing and school masking. They keep insisting school masking is doing irreparable harm to our school kids, and the harm is skewed towards those more disadvantaged students, etc.
Or those who like to stick their tongue out.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why that is with masks, but
well, it's made up.
Yeah, well, okay.
I mean, because if you hate them, then you have to have some reason, and so you make it up. And who's going to check you?
Well, we'll try.
You're not an expert on child development. What do you know?
No, that's true. I said clip once, and you know how that goes.
I do.
I'm just wondering. my guess is that like the
and we
AP classes and honors classes are going to be about 100% masked today, and maybe the other classes not so much. And
yeah, well, some people like to stay in school, and some people don't.
But
fine. So just you decide what you want to do, and then things will change. But a couple of days ago, which is to say today,
that's not to say that at all. But go on.
Greg Gonsalves, associate professor of epidemiology at Yale, longtime AIDS activist, 2018 MacArthur Fellow. That's a Genius Fellow.
Oh, he's a genius. Great.
Well, he's a Genius Fellow. I mean,
all right. He's
it's
around
like
other geniuses.
Apprentice.
Is that what that means? Okay.
Right. The moral danger of declaring the pandemic over too soon. Okay.
All right.
In 1996, the writer Andrew Sullivan came to a meeting of an AIDS activist group I co-founded a few years earlier to push AIDS drug development and research forward. It was just after the data on protease inhibitors had been unveiled. We were known as a crew of hardcore skeptics of claims by drug companies and scientists. They would change the trajectory of the epidemic for many people, including me. Mr. Sullivan went on to write a piece for the New York Times magazine, When Plagues End, which was published in November that year, and rightly noted that AIDS was no longer a death sentence for all infected by the virus, but a chronic manageable illness. Well, that doesn't mean the AIDS pandemic ends.
Oh, I see.
In a way, it did end for many white middle-class gay men like us. We had access to the drug, but AIDS still lingered and flourished in America in places that were easy for people like us to ignore. African-American, Latino communities. And nearly 3 decades later, we're in the midst of a different pandemic, and we've gotten lucky again. We have vaccines. And Helen Branswell wrote an article which basically said, you have to understand vaccines in this short period of time are a freaking miracle. Mm-hmm. We have vaccines for COVID-19. They're also revolutionary. The pandemic has changed. And once more, the desire to get back to normal and to declare the end of another pandemic, at least for some of us, is palpable. And that's exactly what you're going through with the school boards.
Just palped it.
Governor's recent lifting of mask mandates reflects that. There's a demobilization that many suggest is contingent on what might happen with new variants, but could easily become permanent, and much, if not most of the countries moved on or wants to move on. But it's also clear that SARS COVID-2 will be with us for the foreseeable future, and that it will follow the fault lines of social and economic inequality in America. And, of course, we also have the which you didn't write about, but we have the red-blue divide there, too.
Yes, well.
So the lesson of the AIDS pandemic is that it's easy to leave people behind, even if it is at the cost of our collective peril, like pan, as in pandemic. Mm-hmm. Right? Means everybody. Yes. Coronavirus variants can develop in people with weakened immune systems, like those with unrelated HIV. Think of the home we then made for viruses by impeding access to vaccine and allowing millions to go without AIDS treatment. Variants can emerge because of our desire to pull it all behind us. Suspicion about that's what happened in South Africa. No one's truly safe until we all are, but we might act to save millions of people, not just in the interest of self-preservation, but also because, it's the right thing to do,
It's nice to have people around.
So it's a nice thought, right? But the point he's making is that, and it's one that I think Eli Perensevich, who's an epidemiologist and infectious disease specialist in Iowa, who I follow, said, look, there's two households. There's the ones who have immunocompromised people and the ones who are going to have immunocompromised people.
Well, okay.
And that can include such things as, a newborn or a kid under the age of 5 where you don't have vaccines available, or an elderly person, or, somebody with some pre-existing conditions. But those folks don't all of a sudden disappear and don't count. It's like the argument about, the hospital's full, but they only have with AIDS.
Yeah, I'm so tired of hearing that one. Okay, right.
AIDS affects everything. So if you're talking about coronavirus, and it makes you sick enough to be in the hospital because they threw your diabetes out of control. It doesn't matter whether you're with or from. You could be there with a broken leg, and that's a true with and not from. But it still fills the hospital, and it still fills the beds, and it still means that you have to gown and glove, and it still takes resources, and none of it is easy. Mm-hmm. So, whitewashing all of it, it's like covering over the WPA murals and pretending it didn't happen. Oh, now, secondly to that, you have how it's affected the country and how that is not going away. And there's a Pew poll about that.
Oh, okay.
COVID-19 pandemic continues to reshape work in America. Nearly 2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, roughly 6 in 10 U.S. workers who say their job can mainly be done from home, 59%, are working from home.
Among people who can work at home,
among those who can,
all right.
Nearly 60% are.
Well,
which differs from the 23% who that was true before the pandemic.
Ah, okay, right,
okay?
Right. Sure.
So the point is, what are the ramifications of that? Take your basic inner city. Not necessarily New York, but New York because it has other issues. Mm-hmm. But let's take your average mid-sized city, and you have a downtown, and the downtown has workers, and workers work in the buildings. And at lunch they go out and they have lunch, and maybe 4 o'clock they all go out and drink, or maybe they go out and drink at lunch. Not necessarily on weekends. But there are businesses that are built around the fact that there are workers in those buildings.
Right, sure.
Now they're working from home. What happens to those businesses?
They are drinking at home. Oh, the businesses.
The businesses are drinking at home because
the business owners
they just lost their business.
Oh, I can't believe it. Glug, glug, glug. Yeah,
so
probably.
It's changing the whole nature of what does it mean to be downtown. And then you take a place like New York, which is overbuilt and has ancient buildings that aren't as attractive for new businesses that want to start up. Mm-hmm. Because, what do you do? So you lower the rents and everything gets cheaper? Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe you just don't. Yeah. And so, what do you do? Maybe you convert those buildings to lofts or apartments.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right? Or industrial bathrooms or something. What do you do? And so the pandemic is going to drive change. And so if that is inevitable, then the concept of, all we have to do is have the school board vote on it and the governor declare an executive order and we can go back to the way things were. No. We're never going back to the way things were. And when you say that, that doesn't mean that therefore you always have to mask and therefore everybody has to never touch each other again. That's not what we're saying. Oh, well, yes, you are. That's why we have to recall your school board. I mean, there's so much going on here. I totally understand why school boards are a little leery of this whole discussion now.
That and the death threats that they're getting, of course, is going to make them a little nervous too. But that's an excellent point overall that, all right, fine, chuck the masks and don't ask anybody for their vaccine card. And I don't know, that lunch place is still closed. So what are you going to do about it? You can't just mandate that back.
Well, I'm going to elect the other guy because under your watch, that lunch place closed.
Right. Glenn Youngkin's going to be frying egg sandwiches in downtown Richmond.
All right. Here's one from Nature, the science journal.
Okay.
Pandemics disable people. A history lesson that policymakers ignore. Influenza, polio, and more. And polio is probably the best example. Influenza, polio, and more have shown their infections can change lives even decades later. Why the complacency over possible long-term effects of COVID-19?
Because we don't know them.
We don't know how many. We're still defining it. We don't know how long.
Yeah.
From the beginning of this pandemic, the article writes, people with disabilities understood that the disease would target them and would swell their ranks. I remember growing up, and I'm old, that not my peers, because I'm a little too young for that, but the older siblings of my peers, many of them wore braces.
Okay.
And I don't mean teeth braces, I mean leg braces.
Yes. Right.
I remember that growing up. And that was from polio. And so that's an example of polio affecting your life, FDR.
Yeah. Well, lots of people.
Neil Young.
Okay.
Joni Mitchell. I mean, some of these things don't just go away after the epidemic goes away. And health economists warn that, as with tuberculosis, HIV, and other diseases, morbidity would stalk mortality. Too many others have clung stubbornly to a belief that COVID-19 is something from which a minority of people die and most bounce back quickly and intact with only their immune system updated. But the longer the pandemic drags on, the harder it is to maintain that fiction. 2 years in, the debilitating tail of the pandemic has revealed itself in the form of tens of millions of people living with long COVID. It's high time to ask whether attitudes to disability will change as a result. Will society grasp that the body can be altered for a long period, even permanently, by infectious disease, just as it seems to have accepted that the body politic will never be the same again? And will it make the necessary accommodations?
We haven't even accepted that, but yeah.
Right. Long influenza, they cite, for example, post-polio syndrome, and long COVID in the long haul.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody discuss long influenza.
Well, you may see references to the Russian flu in the late 19th century.
Okay.
Let's see.
We don't call it that anymore.
Right, we don't, but they did then.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna.
Right, well, you don't have to.
Okay, thanks.
That qualifies you.
Yeah, that's interesting and new for me. I really have never heard them talk about that, although...
Well, consider the mother of all pandemics, the 1918 Spanish flu outbreak, which we no longer call Spanish flu. Remember, it was called Spanish flu because Spain was neutral, and so they didn't have censors, so you were allowed to talk about it in Spain. Oh. But you weren't allowed to talk about it in any of the other countries because it was killing soldiers. So that's why it's a Spanish flu. But it had something called sleepy sickness. 80% of long influenza survivors went on to develop a Parkinson's-like disease.
Wow. Well, it sounds dangerous and bad, but I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that. It just occurred to me that you personally, well, now you're retired you're not in for it. I was just thinking doctors are going to be facing a new round of, I guess, what will become the new chronic Lyme disease.
Absolutely.
Coming out of this too. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Everybody take your mask off. I'm broadcasting from Virginia, and you're not allowed to wear a mask when you listen. That's the new law. Maybe, possibly. We'll probably pass that one tomorrow. All right, so where were we, Greg? We were
talking about long flu, which people are not that familiar with. And this Nature article points out in 57 and in 68, two subsequent flu pandemics were less pronounced, but both were followed by rises in cases of encephalitis, or brain inflammation. And although it's very difficult to show cause and effect, it's since been established that flu virus can infect the brain and trigger inflammation there. And clinicians see this after every flu season, strokes, heart attacks, predominantly among older people. And flu can cause encephalitis in children. And, of course, we know kids who have died from flu. Yes. It's rare, but it can kill. And those who survive can be left with long-term brain damage. And so the idea that there's a long COVID isn't crazy. In fact, viruses are known to do this. So the point is that declaring it all over doesn't make all this stuff go away. And there's a difference between let's not overreact on the one hand and what do you do about this on the other? Yeah.
Well, right. I think they've conflated the whole thing anyway, and everything from school closures to masking.
Yes, it's all conflated, and then you throw in, and we're also spending money on deep cleaning, and it's like, what are you guys doing?
But that shouldn't.
And so some of the frustration with parents is, I get that we want to take this seriously, but what are you doing? And if you happen to be incompetent before the pandemic is just displaying your incompetence. And that's not going to make us happy. Usually it's hidden.
Yeah, all right. Except for long incompetence, which we eventually discover.
Right. So,
And elect president.
all of the above. So we have that. So switching topics, you want to talk about the Ahmed Arbory trial, or you want to talk about international stuff?
Well, tell me what's new in the trial. I didn't.
Well, let's just do that because that's relatively quickie. This is
right.
the Washington Post. Racist slurs, violent messages, how Arbory's killers talked about black people. And they have access to their posts and tweets and Facebook. Turns out one of the guys couldn't get their phone encryption broken. And he wasn't about to give it up voluntarily. But whatever was sent to the cloud was available.
Oh.
And here's the issue. And in a way, it's sort of a mirror, of what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. Mm-hmm. There's things that you do that are bad, really bad.
Yeah.
And then there's things you do that are against the law.
Okay.
And those aren't the same thing.
Not always, yes.
And that's the problem. Okay? It's not that you could legislate bad. It's just that if you do something that's really bad, but technically it's not against the law, you're going to get away with it from the law's perspective.
Yeah.
That happens. So here you have a case where it's clear these guys killed Ahmed Arbory, and that's bad.
Well, sure.
And they were convicted for it.
Right.
Okay.
So.
But with the all-white jury, the issue of race wasn't central to the case. The issue is whether you killed them in a way that really wasn't appropriate. Doesn't matter why.
Well, that
you
was
just did, and that's bad, and that's against the law, and so you're going to go to jail for it.
All right, I'll take it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
this trial is a federal trial.
Okay.
And it's federal hate crimes charges.
Okay.
So now you're talking about these guys specifically wanted to target Ahmed Arbory because he was black. That's bad. And so the feds are saying that's a hate crime, and you can't do that. However, technically, that's not all there is to it. Okay? You can't just prove, which in this case is really easy to prove, that these guys are racist. You have to show that they had intent to kill him because he was black. And just showing that they were racist assholes isn't a crime. It's not a crime to be a racist. It's a crime to do something because of it.
All right. Yes.
So you have to show, okay, they did this to Ahmed Arbory because he was black.
Yeah. All right.
So you need something. You need something that says, I'm going to go after this guy because he's black, or I'm going to go after the next black person that comes to my neighborhood. Something like that.
Yes.
Just making disparaging remarks about black people isn't enough to get you convicted under a federal hate crime charges. And that's the difficulty for the prosecution. And that's how the case is starting to, roll out. So sure, you can show that these guys were not good people. But that in and of itself isn't against the law. And so that's the part that happens next. And we don't know how this turns out. Now, the fact that they're trying to prosecute him regardless, sends a message.
Yes.
But that's not the same thing as guaranteeing a conviction.
Never guaranteed. I guess it's immensely helped if he does things like tweet to what a great day for a hate crime or something like that.
Legal expert, says the article, and I'm no legal expert. I just read newspaper articles from legal experts or people who have interviewed legal experts. Legal experts have emphasized that prosecutors can't win a conviction merely by proving the defendants are racist. They have to show the jury something more specific, that bias toward black people led them to act. And the most compelling pieces of evidence will always be those that are most directly tied to the incident at hand, of Lana Eisenberg, a Florida State University law professor. Oh, it's Florida State. I wonder if she's allowed to testify.
No, yeah. It's good.
A Florida State, because DeSantis doesn't allow people to testify in a way that he doesn't approve of.
Yeah, although it's happening out of state, so maybe it's okay. I don't know.
Of Lana Eisenberg, a Florida State University law professor who has researched hate crime prosecution, said in an interview, notes that proving motive can be challenging, but also warned that acquittals would deepen a disconnect between official findings and the court of public opinion. Mm-hmm. Right. So, what happens there? Now, he said things one of the guys, Travis McMichael, 36.
Okay.
I say shoot all of them.
Right.
But that's not the same thing as saying shoot this one. Says the defense.
Yeah, that's the defense. But yeah, the problem is, of course, the timeline is, well, there goes one now. Aha. Let's get our guns. Okay, now you're talking. Gotcha. I mean, but I guess they don't have that text because he just said it to the guy next to them.
Right.
Huh.
So, that's how that's going to do. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it's going to go. I mean, it's pretty clear they're racist, but it's not pretty clear that you get convicted on this. And at the same time, they're already behind bars. So I don't know how this goes. But,
keep an eye on it.
If nothing else, it's going to expose the difference between what we say we would like to do and what the law allows you to do in terms of going after racists.
Yeah, that's true. And, if it doesn't work out, I guess there you can say, well, you see, all you people who are in a panic that will just charge everyone with hate crimes, we're very careful about this. You really got to jump through hoops, and it's not easy. You have to be an overt racist who says what they're going to do in order to get convicted under this statute. That's right. That's who it should be meant for.
Right. You have to write it down and send it to the FBI in order to, be able to
do that if you're a racist. Please start now so we can catch you at the appropriate moment.
Right. So let's turn to overseas because there's a lot going on overseas.
Okay. How do you know they're overseas?
We're not going to spend a lot of time on Ukraine. It does seem like all of Biden's excellent moves and smart management and good diplomacy has delayed the invasion from Wednesday to at least Thursday.
Okay, it's by some time, sure.
But at least 24 hours.
Russians were going to give up that easily.
Russia says, we're pulling back. U.S. says, no, actually, you're not. We don't know, so we'll have to see what happens. There's no reason to be overly optimistic, but certainly Biden's doing the right moves. He could have made a whole bunch of wrong moves prior to this that he did not make. And he certainly is holding NATO together at this particular point in time, which is good. And this allows all the NATO folks who would rather not, antagonize the Russians to try what they try. And when that doesn't work, at least you can say, okay, everybody had the opportunity. I was right. I told you. And, that basically is happening there. Very interesting article by David Rothkopf in the Daily Beast. What happens to Ukraine matters to every American. The global consequences of a Russian invasion will hit Americans where they live too. If the article is too long, didn't read, behind a paywall, just be aware it's going to affect energy prices, and that will affect you.
Me?
Higher gas prices will contribute to inflation, slower recovery. That's bad news for Democrats. As Biden, because everything's bad news for Democrats. As Biden indicated in his speech, the administration is exploring a variety of measures to help offset, reducing the taxes on gasoline. But Republicans don't want to do that because they want the president's party to be blamed for high prices.
They're against
That's
tax
what the article
cuts.
says.
I knew it. Gotcha.
And that's totally within keeping.
Oh, yeah, right. Ideology, what? What's that?
All of a sudden, Thomas Friedman makes an appearance again. He's back in the New York Times with the headline, "Is Sleepy Joe Biden making Vladimir Putin blink?" And just simply makes the point that for all of these people who say Biden's senile, look what he's done with this particular crisis, which is about as good as it gets. And that doesn't look like a guy who's senile, so you got to find something else to talk about.
Okay. I mean, why did he use that? Sleepy. I think he was trying to, how do you like that? He's so sleepy he made Putin
I watch Fox News, so I'll talk to the Fox News people who in no way, shape, or form
will understand this.
Will understand any of it, see it, read it.
Sleepy, I knew it.
Or react to it. So it was a complete waste of time. All I did is remind everybody why I'm Thomas Friedman.
Right. Well, wait 6 months and remind us again.
Yeah, exactly. Separately, here's a Morning Consult poll. Even a plurality of Republicans now favor the JCPOA, to remind people that's Iran and the nuclear deal.
Oh, yes, thank you.
What? What does that stand for? Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action?
Maybe.
The A
that
is not
sounds
attack.
Like
That's what Trump thought it was, but
plan
no, it's action.
Plan of apple fritters. I don't know. Yeah. Okay,
or
that might be it.
Appliances that get clogged. No, the A stands for action.
All right. Huzzah for action.
U.S. voters support the 2015 Iran deal by more than a 2-to-1 margin. So whether we can ever get back to it or not, there's another thing where once you change things, it isn't so easy to get back to where you were. Another international thing that we can talk about for a moment is Boris Johnson.
He's international.
Yes, and he's very naughty. And Scotland Yard,
Yes.
which is a police force, not just a location,
Right.
is going to interview him about all these parties that he wasn't supposed to go to because it was against the law. And Boris Johnson has until tomorrow to respond. He's going to argue his presence was part of the working day and all the pictures of the bubbly are just fooling you for no reason.
I see.
And all of the
4 o'clock.
tinsel leis that are and party hats had nothing to do with it. That's just our regular work day. We do that every day here at number 10 because it's just such a fun place to work.
It's great. It keeps things light.
So what happens is he'll reject the allegation he broke any laws. Scotland Yard may have other things to say about that. After that is then when we see whether there's a no confidence vote. In other words, if Scotland Yard says, no, we got like 500 pictures of you partying, then those no confidence letters are going to come. I think they need 54 and they have 43 or something like that. I forget
I didn't
the
even know
exact
what the
numbers,
process
but
was.
you need a certain number to trigger a no confidence vote. They have about 2/3 of them. The others are waiting to see what Scotland Yard has to say about it.
Can I forge them and send them?
Scotland Yard will reportedly reveal the number of people fined at each Partygate event being investigated and explain why the decision was taken, civil servants have been told. You can tell from that framing that it's a British paper. It's from The Guardian. Speaking on a visit in Scotland, Johnson said he would have a lot more in due course to say, of course.
All right. Well, he just wanted things to go back to normal and everybody to drink at 4 o'clock.
Regular listeners to the show are kind of caught up on that, so you know what's going on there. And also regular listeners to the show are caught up on what's going on in Ottawa. Canadian police vow to take back Ottawa downtown and stand off with Freedom Convoy protesters, says the Washington Post. Basically, everybody outside of Ottawa is more or less getting back to normal as the police get rid of the blockades. There are about 6 or 7 of them, tiny ones. The Ottawa ones, basically the citizens have done more than the cops. So we'll see what happened. But police on Wednesday handed demonstrators flyers in English and French telling them to leave or face arrest, also warning that participants who are convicted of crimes could be barred from entering the United States. So the moves could set the stage for tougher action to quell the standoff gripping the city after Trudeau became the first Canadian leader to invoke the country's Emergencies Act.
All right. First.
Officials have said the Emergencies Act gives police the authority to declare some zones, including Parliament and critical infrastructure, off-limits for protests that breach the peace. Banks may freeze accounts without a court order. Royal Canadian Mounted Police could help enforce local laws. Apparently, this permits the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to get off their horses and onto the ground.
Dismounted.
And tow truck firms may be compelled to haul vehicles out.
Yeah, apparently they're having problems with that. And the tow truck drivers are, I guess, on the side of the convoy people.
Yeah, tow truck operators are kind of worried because they're being forced to pick sides and they don't want to.
Yeah, well, we could blow up the trucks. Well, I don't want to tell the Canadians how to do this.
In a tearful video posted on social media, Tamara Leach, a convoy organizer who had earlier pledged that protesters would remain on Parliament Hill until mandates are lifted, indicated it was, quote, inevitable at this point, end quote, that she'd face arrest and possible prison, but urged people to join them in Ottawa. You have to know they're trying to provoke us. Tomorrow's a new day. I'm ready. I'm not afraid. We're going to hold the line. Hold the line. A lot of lines crossed.
All right. Well, we'll hold you, and people will have to get in line to visit you in jail. How about that?
Right.
That's, again, me telling Canadians what to do. I say we, I mean you, but good luck.
Again, I'm not so sure that this is going to end and play out the way that the organizers thought it would.
But that's just because they thought
what
so
happened.
poorly.
Sometimes, like with the Occupy people, you go into this knowing you're not necessarily going to win, but you got to do because you feel like it's right.
Yes, and
other times you go into it
would be arrested.
honest, like the January 6th people, honestly thinking that you're going to win.
Yes,
which is the only honest thing about what they did. Right? And so if you go into this thinking you're going to win and you lose, it's very dispiriting and demoralizing and potentially dangerous.
Yes.
So at least at one place, I think in Alberta,
Oh.
I could be wrong about that, but at one place, remember, somebody was arrested with a bunch of weapons.
Yes, that I believe you're right. It was Alberta.
But, I'm old and I don't remember these things. Yeah. So that's your international roundup. A lot going on there. One of the things you don't hear about a lot is Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Because he's gone, right?
Well, he's still in Knesset. He's still in Parliament there.
So goes to
he's
work
still in the
day.
Congress. But he
parties?
just doesn't have the influence he used to, so you don't hear a lot about it.
All right. Well, some pictures of him drinking would be helpful.
And then finally, a little bit more personal story. We mentioned it. You mentioned it on the air yesterday after I left.
Oh.
But I sent a picture of a local headline from my local newspaper about the Sandy Hook families basically getting a settlement in a lawsuit for a lot of money.
Yeah.
And because of that, they sent the message that, look, you are not invulnerable. You're not untouchable.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Right? So after I sent that, E.J. Dion, who's been a pen pal of mine for a long time, ever since I interviewed him for a book he wrote back at Daily Kos in the old days, saw my picture and then retweeted it and said, never give up. You can't win a fight unless you start fighting.
Yes. Well, good.
And
nice.
Thank you for this.
Set the theme. All right.
And then he wrote me a note and said, you gave me the lead. That's the first paragraph or line that tells the audience what the story's going to be about. You wrote the lead for my column.
Awesome. I see it.
And so he wrote a column by E.J. Dion that says, thank you, Sandy Hook families, for taking on the gun makers. Sandy Hook families win unwinnable case. That was the headline in the paper.
Yeah.
Yes, this was the best headline heralding the victory Tuesday of 9 families of Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting victims in their lawsuit against now bankrupt Remington Arms Company. The gunmaker manufactured the AR-15 style weapon used to murder 20 first graders and 6 adults on December 14th, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut, otherwise known as 1214 around here. The family's local paper in Danbury, Connecticut, the News Times, was right to underscore how almost no one thought the plaintiffs could win given the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act of 2005. The scandalous Orwellian-named federal law was designed to shield gun makers from lawsuits, but it's amazing when you think about it. The makers of merchandise so destructive were granted immunity from the forms of accountability that are typically imposed on manufacturers of all manner of other goods. Mm-hmm. So he writes, the genius of the Sandy Hook families and their lawyers was to cite a state law, the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act, and focus on the marketing practices used to sell the rifle.
Yes.
They encouraged its illegal use and might have been especially enticing to troubled young men. Mm-hmm. One ad showed an image of a Bushmaster with the words, consider your man card reissued. Another said, forces of opposition, bow down, you are single-handedly outnumbered.
Yeah.
And the $73 million awarded to the families is, according to the New York Times, believed to be the largest payout by a gun company in a mass shooting case. More important going forward is the company agreed to release thousands of pages of internal documents. This is like, go ahead, sue me. There's this thing called discovery. You'll be sorry.
Yeah, the marketing stuff. I love it. Let's do it. It's going to make all the kids want one. Oh, don't write that. Oh, right. But they did. Okay.
No, it's usually worse. I mean, it's like in the tobacco stuff. Yeah, we know it causes cancer, but think how much money we make. It's that kind of stuff.
Yes, and that rings a bell. The Bushmaster, has been part of some of the really just the most notorious mass
egregious
shootings.
Stuff. Yeah,
not just.
It's not like little pink rifles for girls. It's like, oh, if you're really a man, you'll mow over the opposition with this great,
Yeah, as I recall, that was what the Washington snipers were using.
Knowing the impact this could have in the longer-term battle over gun violence, the families made release of this information a linchpin of their suit. The position was no documents, no deal.
Okay.
So that's why it was so good.
It's
David
terrific.
Hemingway, director of the Harvard Injury Control Research Center. I know him. He's been to Newtown to talk about this, so we've had him over for local discussion. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm part of this. I'm one of the local people who was very interested in this, and help invite people to come talk to our town about how to heal and so on and so forth. But the families are a different group altogether. Sandy Hook Promise and some of the others, if you're interested in donating, Sandy Hook Promise is a great way to do it. David Hemingway, director of the Harvard Injury Control Research Center, drew a parallel to the long campaign around the dangers of smoking. One of the big successes in public health in the last 30 years is tobacco, the author of While We Were Sleeping, Success Stories in Injury and Violence Prevention, and a professor of public health. And one of the great things that helped in that success were the lawsuits. What lawsuits made clear is these are bad actors. And then Giffords Law Center has comments. There's a lot of people working on this for a long, long time. Obviously, the political stuff has stalled, but there's still other things going on. And again, this isn't an endorsement of Kagro in the Morning. It's my own personal. I really like Sandy Hook Promise and what they do. And one of the things they do is work on, for example, high school messaging and training. If you see something, say something. And these are the kinds of signs that you might see in a high school kid that tells you they're troubled. And please report this, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I think in the end, really a very, very good organization. So there was that. And so the personal is political and the political is personal. It's my town. And I was involved in some of the earliest responses to it. I was still a physician working in town at the time. And to see this through and watch Sandy Hook Promise develop into a long-term organization that isn't just about having protests, and then seeing the families put together this lawsuit and then winning, and then with a promise that we have yet to achieve of getting those documents, and putting you in the situation of thank you for smoking, if you remember that movie. And it's all good.
It could be
It doesn't
terrific.
bring the kids back. The families would trade the money for the kids any day. But you do what you can with what you got.
Yeah, and this ought to be there'll be some spillover effect probably to other manufacturers as well. Other people will file similar suits, use this as precedent. Probably in among the documents is all sorts of research about their competitors in the market. That'll be interesting.
Yep.
All right.
So one of our very good followers tweeted me
Yes.
the day that the Remington decision was announced and said, do you have any words on this? And just a personal note, sometimes it takes a while to digest all of it, find out what the details are, have people write about it so you can comment on it, which is what we do. And so it takes a few days.
Okay. Well, you can take your time and come up with good or better words.
Yeah, and so,
excellent.
do not try this at home. Some of this you shouldn't try at home, but,
Yes.
Reflecting on it, that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And even if it looks impossible, maybe you should try it, after all.
Anyway, E.J. Dion's just like a really nice person.
Yeah, well, that sounds good, and it's nice, and right up there at the top is your line, and it's linked and everything, which, as you know, we've been around long enough to remember when the practice was just, hey, that's a great line, I'll just take that and say it's mine, as opposed to...
And he didn't have to say it in the article,
No.
He told me thank you,
Yeah.
and that's good enough.
And then links as well, so they've come a long way, these newspaper-type people. Excellent. Okay.
Right, and so the link in the article actually isn't to the article, it's to my tweet.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, what would it link to?
Which you'll notice, see what it says at the very top, if you have that tweet open?
Okay, I will open it. Oh, yeah, look at that. Hey, we're in the newspaper,
It's to you.
everybody.
I was writing to you. It says KITM Kagro X local coverage. That's the tweet that EJ linked to in the Washington Post.
He saw that. That the sort of back channel communications. Open. Well, beware. Next time you guys are thinking about screw that EJ Dion guy, don't think that just putting the KITM hashtag on it will hide it from him. He'll see it
apparently
come
not.
after you.
Anyway, that's my report for today, and it's Thursday, so that means I'm done for the week.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see.
And I will talk to you, I guess, on Monday, right?
Yes, I think so. And hopefully we'll all still be healthy. I see in that picture of your front page story, not only the big banner headline is the Sandy Hook family's case, and then right next to it, of course, is schools drop mask mandate. So
yeah, facial coverings will be required on school buses.
Yes, that's federal law, as it turns out.
But no longer require masks for students and staff, and that's starting March 1st.
Oh, see, that's what we were supposed to have, but then our people went crazy. So we started today instead, and that's where I learned it, in the communications from the school, that masking on the school buses is still required because they are covered by federal transportation law.
Yep.
And so, very interesting. So your kids are going to be experienced in cross-jurisdictional application
Well, they have their
public
masks with
health
them,
law.
so they can decide what they want to do with them. So it's kind of interesting. You have to wear
yes.
it on the bus anyway, so you might as well keep it in your pocket, and then, depending upon circumstances, you can decide whether or not to wear it.
No, oh, by the way, you kids can't decide that. Parents won. It's parents' control. So I had that discussion with my son this morning. You don't get to decide. Glenn Youngkin said he was fighting for parents to have that right. So that's me.
So
and not
basically,
you.
he's telling you that you have to go to school with your kid. You keep
Either
an eye
that,
on them.
or attach some sort of an alarm, or he has to wear a body
Or a camera.
cam or something.
That's what they wanted
That's
to
what
do
they
in
do
Iowa.
now these days. That's the trend, right?
Right?
Exactly.
We not only can check whether or not you're wearing masks, I can see whether or not you're teaching critical race theory.
That is true. And if I catch you without the mask, Texas will pay me $10,000 to sue you. Or something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, take care, and
good.
I will talk to you on Monday.
That's a fine time for it, too. And it'll be President's Day at that, and a holiday, and the kids will be home, and they won't have to wear masks. So, all to the good. All right, I appreciate it, and let's
What are you
see.
going to do about that mural of Washington in your living room?
I am going to paint it over again, and it is going to be George
Whitewashing.
Washington Carver when I'm done. How about that? I don't know. I had no idea that they had such a thing. And how interesting to go back and research it and find out that the artist had a completely different message than you thought. I
Among
could see
the
it very
many
easy to
things that
believe.
happen here in New England is we have national parks like Acadia up in Maine that I love to go to. And we have this beautiful Civilian Conservation Corps work that was done in the 30s. The WPA sparked a lot of things, including a wonderful set of Mills Brothers songs associated with it.
okay.
I mean, the WPA is like good. And so painting that kind of history over, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's all sorts of lessons to be learned from it, and especially, if you find out the original intent of the artist and put up a big plaque, it'll be, well, all right. Maybe they didn't know that, they didn't do their research. You should all do your own research online, San Francisco School Board, which I think might have led to some of the problems to begin with. But they love recalls in California, so you always have to be careful. Even though I'm old enough to remember that Republicans hated precipitous change in public policy, and that's why
And
they
spending
need a
money on
filibuster. Yeah. All right. All out the window if they smell a win. So nothing new there. All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg has parted. And we'll catch up with him again on Monday. And let's see, how can we ruin all of his good work in the next hour? I don't really know if it can be undone, but I have this update. We can undo the good work that Joan did. I know that. It's only, 2 days have passed, right? She was here Tuesday. It's Thursday. And yesterday it looked like everything was on track for the, you know what, she kind of predicted both of these things now that I think about it. But you'll recall that we had our discussion about the continuing resolution that would be necessary in order to keep the government open and functioning being held up by, Republican senators latching on to the latest craze of the, oh my God, the government is sending crack pipes to everybody. And I loved the part where they said they're sending out, they're giving crack pipes away for free in the name of racial equality, which I thought was just fantastic gilding of the lily there. I guess they thought, well, it's not enough. Most people won't be outraged just by free government crack pipes. Like, what? Of course they will be. But I guess in the age of hype, and you got to pump things up to the next level. Is that what else? People are also upset about critical race theory and sort of diversity and sensitivity training and equality in general, or at least Republicans are up in arms about it. So we'll throw that one in there too. And so it's free crack pipes, but for racial equality, as though there was some major disparity and all the crack pipes were being hoarded by white people. And well, we just have to get African Americans their fair share of crack pipes. I don't think that was a really huge issue, but I don't know why they threw in racial equality into that. I don't know. It just reminded me of something that, like, way back in the, what movie am I thinking of? The awful movie that I didn't see enough times to remember, but I'm trying to think, like, back in the 80s. I better go to IMDb and find out what the hell I'm thinking of here. But crime, drama movies along the lines of Lethal Weapon, right? Crime fighting buddies or whatever. What was the name of this movie? I'm going to look it up and see if I'm thinking of the right one before I embarrass myself here. But, everything is branded for the launch of the new Peacock series Bel Air, which I can't even believe is a real thing, but I might even actually watch. But I'm thinking of the movie, is it, come on, click through, show me this stuff. Yeah. Although, no, I guess the people aren't writing this. I'm thinking of the movie Tequila Sunrise, which, awful piece of crap, as I recall, and also involved Mel Gibson, not coincidentally, I guess. But I must be thinking of a different one. Or maybe it was one of the Lethal Weapon movies, because they made so many of them. But one of these movies where they're fighting the bad guy, and the bad guy is a drug dealer. Now, in Tequila Sunrise, the bad guy is... there are drug dealers involved, too. Apparently, a good guy, former drug dealer, who's going to go and help fight the bad guy, current drug dealers. But they're dealing with Mexican drug cartels. I'm thinking of, I don't know which movie, but just where I felt like they piled it on. Bad guy is a drug dealer, so clearly, everybody knows, culturally, that's the bad guy. We're going to defeat the bad guy drug dealer, but just to really make sure that you couldn't possibly sympathize him, this was again in the 1980s, that he's a South African drug dealer as well. So, then say, I love drugs and apartheid, he says. And I guess he's texting to his friends. We didn't have that at the time. But you know what I mean. Anyway, I guess they're going to crack pipes for racial equality was the same sort of thought in their head. Anyway, that's what led the senators to latch on to it, the Republican senators, and they decided, all right, well, I'll slow down, I'll threaten to shut down the government unless we get some sort of fake concession from Democrats, just to make them bend the knee and knuckle under. I won't allow the bill to pass unless there's an amendment adopted that says no federal funds from this or any other bill, I guess, can be used to send free crack pipes for racial equality, racial inequality, no reason whatsoever. Just stop mailing the crack pipes to everybody, which is not happening. So it's one of those situations where Democrats, would be liable to say, well, look, the government is going to shut down if we don't do this stupid thing. And we're not sending it to anybody, so it's no skin off my nose. Nothing has changed. Nobody's getting crack pipes in the mail for any reason. And fine, if that's what it takes to fund the government, you win. Have your talking point. And then they go out and say, see, this proves that they were going to do it, but I stopped it. And it's, it's a charade, but they go through it. Anyway, Marsha Blackburn was the first one, I guess, to pick up on this and say, I'm going to stop this thing unless crack pipes, yada, yada, yada. And then Joan told us, well, in all likelihood, she'll probably end up having to jump out of the way because there are probably enough Republicans who are like, enough with this crap. We got to fund the government. We don't want the shutdown. We don't want to be tarred with that. And you should just get out of the way. We'll do the crack pipe thing another time, whatever. And so Blackburn apparently yesterday does, in fact, drop her hold on the bill, as Emily Cochran tweets here. Senator Blackburn dropped her hold, per her spokesperson, after she received an answer in writing from the HHS secretary committing that no taxpayer dollars will be used to fund crack pipes. And now ordinarily that's the sort of thing that Republicans say, no, that's not enough. A letter from the HHS secretary. I need a law prohibiting this from ever happening because you're all liars. But she was not going to be able to get that in time to not shut down the government and satisfy the Republicans who were leaning on her. So she jumps out of the way and drops her hold. Fine, great. And so I said, all right, Joan's right, everybody. She predicted that this was how this would end, and they would tell Blackburn to get out of the way and let things roll. What we didn't discuss was the possibility of somebody else saying, I want to turn with this. Marsha Blackburn got in the news. I could get in the news if I put a hold on this thing. And so Who's jerky enough to do that? You might guess like Ted Cruz, and you might be right. Ted Cruz may yet do it. But typically Ted Cruz doesn't like to pick up others' cast-offs. He will just find a new way to go to a new level of disgustingness and push that instead. Who is that hungry for press and that intellectually lazy? And the answer to that is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio reporting, it was reported yesterday. I have an article from The Hill. Rubio now holding up the funding bill over crack pipes. Didn't even come up with something new. So Blackburn drops her hold. They report that news. Rubio says, ooh, time for me to do that. Senator Marco Rubio is holding up a quick vote on a short-term spending bill as he pushes for passage of his bill, he wants the law, prohibiting federal funding from going toward crack pipes, which it isn't, and other drug paraphernalia, which it might be. Rubio confirmed that he is trying to get a vote on his bill, which he introduced last week with Senator Joe Manchin in exchange for speeding up the continuing resolution. Because senators are days away from the Friday night deadline to prevent a shutdown, they need buy-in from all 100 senators in order to speed up the bill. My hope is that we can just pass it without anybody objecting to it, especially since the administration is already claiming they don't need it. So that's an interesting tool, right? It's not happening. Well, then you shouldn't object to it. Well, it's not that I object to it. I object to you, right? I know what's going to happen. This thing isn't happening, so then you shouldn't object to it. Okay, fine. But if I don't object to it, will you admit that it's not happening? No, because I plan to go out and say it was happening, but I stopped it. So anyway, so there we are, and we'll see whether anybody indulges him or whether other people turn to Rubio and say, you heard what we said to Marsha. The same applies to you. Cut it out. Get out of the way. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But now he's got Manchin with him. Who knows what's going to happen? So maybe they get their thing through on unanimous consent. But to what avail, I don't know. It goes to the House, and the House isn't here, and they're not going to pass it. So, well, I don't know. They might pass it. They're not going to pass it now because they're not here to do it. They might give in, too, just the way the Senate Democrats in the state legislature in Virginia did, jumping out of the way of the governor's amendment to bump up the effective date of the mask mandate bill. People do strange things. Anyway, so that's the news that's all the crack pipe news, I think, for today, unless there's something else. We used to give out government cheese. Now it's crack pipes, except it isn't. So you figure that one out. Huh? Everybody's cashing in on it and getting their moment in the sun. All right, other stories to share with you from all over the place. Let's see. I'm just going to go through what's in pocket here today because there are quite a few things to clear out. Speaking of state legislatures, interesting story. Always fun to hear about things going on up in Alaska as we pick up from our friends at the Mud Flats, the blog, the local Alaska blog that came to everybody's attention when we all needed to find out who the hell Sarah Palin was. And now, of course, we all know very well. And now we just read the Mud Flats for fun and interest. So let's see. Whose story am I looking at here? Does it say? There's a couple of them. And you may know a couple of the writers from Mud Flats. Gene Devin, Shannon Moore were the two that came to us with the Sarah Palin onslaught, and so they're the ones I'm familiar with at Mud Flats. Anyway, here's an interesting story just coming out under the Mud Flats umbrella, which I think Gene actually runs this Twitter feed. Alaskans have a member of the state house who has doubled down on his loyalty and lifetime membership in the Oath Keepers, despite the leadership of that organization trying to overthrow the U.S. government. But the Alaska Constitution actually says that's a no-go. Hearings are held. Time to expel, they say. I mean, I don't know whether the Republicans in the legislature are going to agree. And here's a guide. And the link included here is to Ivan Hodes, who is he one of the contributors now at Mud Flats, or is he writing elsewhere? Let's see. I don't see him listed there. But at any rate, he'll tell the story if I don't know. There's a lot of contributors, so I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Who knows? By the end of this scrolling, I'm going to be ending up as one of these contributors. Okay. Oh, and Scott tells me he's done the IMDb research, or just picked his own brain here. A Lethal Weapon 2. So I was on the sort of the right track. There was a Mel Gibson. I threw in the Lethal Weapon. I don't remember how many Lethal Weapons they made, but at any rate, there seemed to be plenty to go around. Yeah, that's the one with the South African drug dealer. That was a dumb plot twist, don't you think? I don't know. Apologies to all Lethal Weapon 2 fans. Or fans of sequels for the camp value, perhaps. All right, Ivan was gonna. Is that real? That's just not his real name, is it? Ivan Hodes. Ivan Hodes. I don't know. Now it's starting to dawn on me. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. Parents have weird senses of humor. The Oath Keeper hearings have concluded, says Ivan. All the information about how dangerous they are is on the public record, and now it's time to make the Alaska legislature act on the information that they have. One of 10 tweets in this thread. Let's see what information they have. On Friday, February 18th, call the legislators. They're having a call-in day. That's tomorrow. So if you live in Alaska, call. If you live in Canada, take revenge on the United States for spreading its illness to you and call and pretend you're Alaskan. If you live elsewhere in the United States, I guess, yeah, I don't know. The trick is, if you were Republicans and the shoe was on the other foot, you would call and say you were Alaskans, right? Anyway. They're having a call-in day. If you really do live in Alaska, I encourage you to call. Yes, again, it says. Call your legislators again. Hearing from constituents is the only thing that moves the needle. We've already moved it, but we got to move it further. You know, that's always true. And it says this time everybody should call 3 legislators, regardless of their party or caucus. Call your own, call the Speaker of the House, and call the House Majority Leader. 3 calls, a couple of minutes each. That's what he's encouraging you to do here. And what about the information about the case itself? It's interesting. He gives a suggested message in case you're listening and waiting by the phone. What should I say? You should say the hearings about Oath Keepers have shown beyond reasonable doubt that they are a dangerous organization that advocates the overthrow of the U.S. government. As a proud life member of Oath Keepers, Representative David Eastman, that's who we're talking about. I don't know if he's related to John Eastman or not. Be interesting to find out. I doubt it. But Representative David Eastman is disqualified from public office by Article 12, Section 4 of the Alaska Constitution. Of course, there will be people who dispute that, as they do in the Madison Cawthorn case, but very interesting. So now you know. Check out Article 12, Section 4. Please consider bringing forward a motion to expel him from the legislature. Sure, why not? It seems pretty interesting, and I don't know. We should go and see what the Article 12, Section 4 has to say for itself. Anyway, I just want to bring that to your attention. And as much as I'm now tempted to dive into the Alaska Constitution, I'll hold it for later if we find out we have extra time. We'll get to a couple other stories. Let's see. Speaking of jerky people who worked with the former guy, we could take a look here. The Washington Post reports yesterday, Ryan Zinke, you remember him? Ryan Zinke, the fake, was it Montana congressman who actually doesn't even live in Montana? And was it Montana? I can't remember. One of the northern Plain states that we all confuse all the time, but I think it might have been him. Yeah, got it right. Anyway, he's an unethical jerk. That's the too long didn't read thing, except why bother, because I'm going to read it to you. You know that. Ryan Zinke broke ethics rules while leading Trump's Interior Department, Watchdog finds. The department's inspector general found Zinke had repeated contact with developers about a real estate deal and lied about it to an ethics official. The Justice Department declined to bring charges. And I don't know whether we're talking about the Trump Justice Department. I mean, that would make sense that they would decline to bring charges. I don't know whether the Biden Justice Department has an opportunity or had an opportunity and didn't do it. That would also not be terribly surprising. Disappointing, yes, but not surprising. And once again, you know, Republican wrongdoing in an office, who cares? There's a real estate deal. I know we had a whole 6,000 year investigation of Whitewater, but screw that. Ryan Zinke, something. Anyway, Anna Phillips and Lisa Rain, how does she pronounce? R-E-I-N. Call up, Lisa, and let us know. Sorry about that. let's read your solid reporting instead. We'll say it's solid. I haven't read it, but make it up to you by saying your reporting is awesome. Facing serious allegations about his ethics and conduct in office, Ryan Zinke, then Secretary of Donald Trump's Interior Department, told a government official in 2018 that he had done nothing improper. I've done nothing wrong. Like Rand Paul's neighbor. Negotiations over a land deal in his hometown of Whitefish, Montana, were proceeding without him. His involvement was minimal, he said. His meeting with the project's developers at Interior headquarters was purely social, which means get back to work, Zinke. What the hell's wrong with you? But a report released Wednesday by the department's internal watchdog caught Zinke in a lie. Oh, okay, so he was just lying. Email and text messages exchanged show that he communicated with the developers, one time, 2 times, 3, 4, 64 times between August 2017 and July 2018 to discuss the project's design, the use of his foundation's land as a parking lot, and his interest in operating a brewery on the site, because he was not busy as Interior Secretary, I guess. These communications, examples of which are set forth below, show that Secretary Zinke played an extensive, direct, and substantive role in representing the foundation during negotiations with the 95 Kagro project developers. Inspector General Mark Greenblatt's office wrote, Zinke, quote, was not simply a pass-through for information, the report said. He personally acted for or represented the foundation in connection with the negotiations. The report found that Zinke broke federal ethics rules repeatedly by improperly participating in real estate negotiations with the then chairman of the energy giant Halliburton and other developers. Zinke continued to represent his family's foundation in the negotiations for nearly a year. Do some more things wrong. Why don't you, Ryan? Investigators found even after committing to federal officials that he would resign from the foundation and would not do any work on its behalf after he joined the Trump administration, which again, why would I? I just saw the president say, I'm going to give up the day-to-day running of my business and then not do it. I'm going to put things in a blind trust and then not do it. I'm going to, donate all the money I got from the hotel to the Treasury and then not do it. Although eventually, apparently, he donated something somewhere along the line, but no accounting for anything. Why would you do it if your president is doing the same? If your president is cheating in the same way, you got to think you're going to get away with it too. Although I would remind you, I would have told him, and I've been counseling him at the time. You're talking about Donald Trump. That doesn't mean he's going to have your back because I would be hypocritical if I did it and didn't let him do it. No, he'll hang you out to dry the minute he gets a chance. He'll probably see if he can sell your corpse. Anyway, Zinke continues, to represent his family for nearly a year. It's like, I only talked to him once socially. All right, 64 times over the course of a year. After I said I would resign. All right. Where were we here? Oh, yes, right. He met with the developers in his office at Interior headquarters in the summer of 2017, using our resources to have a cozy meeting, after which he gave them a personal tour of the Lincoln Memorial. This is the Lincoln. He's sitting down, as you see. This is the national chair that he's sitting in here. And if you turn around, it's just like Forrest Gump. There you go. I'm sure. What kind of tour can he give? Anyway, so he gives a tour of the Lincoln Memorial and dined with them at a German beer garden in the district, Biergartenhaus, which isn't even a very creative name for a beer garden that's German. But okay, that's not his doing. That all according to records of his official schedule. They actually put that down there. Put down that I'm drinking beer in the middle of the day. Thank you. Although investigators said they could not be sure what was discussed during this visit, they found it was not entirely social, as the developers presented Zinke with a plan for the parking lot during their trip to Washington. But that's how we socialize, talking about parking lots. Investigators also found that contrary to Zinke's claims that his wife had taken over the project, the only evidence of communication between Lola Zinke, and the developers was a single email from one developer to another saying that Lola Zinke was rescinding the parking lot arrangement. So, in a statement, the Zinke campaign, and that's the real issue here, the campaign. He's running for Congress again, right? I don't know if he's running for Senate, or I imagine he'd be running for Senate, not for the old House seat. But imagine being this much of a corrupt idiot and saying, yeah, I could probably walk back into office in Montana, despite, by the way, not living there. Apparently he's been spending all his time in California, but okay. So in a statement, the Zinke campaign, which shouldn't even exist, called the investigation a Biden administration-led report. So, therefore, publishing false information, and was shared with the press as a political hit job. It's the Inspector General's office. He's inspected something, and generally we expect him to then tell us what he's inspected and what he's found. That's what happens with these things. The report is totally subjective, and they admitted they released it because their conclusions were too flimsy and biased for DOJ to even consider, the campaign said. I don't know. Greenblatt, they point out here in the Post, was appointed by Trump, which, again, is why you should never really have any faith in Trump. Trump will protect me. But now he can't. But he could have then. He could have fired the guy. Now a leading Republican candidate for a newly drawn congressional seat. Oh, wow, he is going back to the House. A newly drawn congressional seat in Montana this fall. Zinke also misused his official position, the report concluded. So why not give him another one, right? By the way, you should probably declare him an insurrectionist and make him ineligible to run. Investigators found that he had directed some of his staff to set up a meeting with the developers and print documents related to the project. So, yes, use of official resources for your private business. Federal officials are generally prohibited from assigning their employees tasks related to their private business. The Inspector General did not find that Zinke violated federal conflict of interest laws because his communications with the developers centered on a private business deal rather than official Interior Department matters. Investigation also did not find evidence that Zinke had used his position to benefit Halliburton or for his own financial gain, or that his staff tried to conceal his continuing involvement with the development team. So it wasn't like he was appropriating federal government land, privatizing it, buying it himself, and then reselling it as a parking lot. But I would dispute the conclusion here that he didn't violate conflict of interest laws, and that he didn't use his official position to benefit his own financial picture, because he did. He used his position to order his aides to use official resources to further his private business deals. That's the definition of using your office for public gain. But they try to limit it to making decisions that would say privatizing Interior Department controlled land for your own use or something like that. Not using the Xerox machine. But look, there's a line. Shouldn't cross it. The Washington Post first reported that the Inspector General had referred the matter to the Justice Department in 2018, but the case remained open until last summer when prosecutors declined to press criminal charges. So, all right, I guess, 2018 through 2020 was up to the Trump Justice Department, and what do you know? They found it too flimsy to go forward with. And then Joe Biden's team, I guess, had a quick pass at it over the summer and did nothing. Zinke, that's too bad. A former Navy SEAL, 60-year-old Navy SEAL. He's no longer a Navy SEAL, but he's the oldest Navy SEAL. I just skipped over the part that he's 60 years old. Who rode to work on horseback on his first day at Interior. You remember that one? Served one term in the House of Representatives before joining Trump's cabinet. A major proponent of oil and gas drilling and coal mining, Zinke resigned under pressure less than 2 years later under an avalanche of investigations into his conduct. And yet here he is running again. If you had any doubt about Republicans having no shame, and no, you can't run them out of politics by proving that they're corrupt or inept, they'll just come back later. With Trump's endorsement and a strong name recognition in a swath of western Montana that Trump carried by 7 points in 2020, Zinke is widely favored to win his home state's new House seat. What an embarrassment for his home state. The investigation into his real estate dealings began in the summer of 2018 after Politico reported that Zinke remained involved in his project while in office. This raised conflict of interest concerns because the project involved a development group funded by David J. Lesar, L-E-S-A-R, then the chairman of Halliburton, which stood to benefit from policies Zinke oversaw, encouraging oil and gas drilling on public lands. Lesar's company planned to build a large development along the Whitefish River with shops, a hotel, and a brewery. Zinke's family foundation agreed to donate land for a parking lot, and I guess, I don't know, he figured he had designs on running that brewery. Here's a parking lot, will you give me the brewery? I guess that was the deal. We'll find out maybe more after this.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's jump back into the Ryan Zinke story because he's a very sleazy guy, and there's a lot of sleaze to cover. But just to remind you of all the things that he did. So we left off by saying, the Halliburton was going to develop this large plot of land near the Whitefish River with shops, hotels, and a brewery, which usually smells great. You always want to have a brewery in town. Zinke's family foundation had agreed to donate land for a parking lot. Why? Well, like I said, he probably wanted to get a hold of that brewery, but also there's more. The project known as 95 Caro, not exactly sure why, but who cares? The project had the potential to increase the value of multiple parcels of land the Zinkes owned nearby. Okay. Zinke declined investigators' requests to meet with them. When they asked him for an interview, he refused, because of all of his innocence. The Whitefish land deal was one of at least 15 inquiries launched into alleged misconduct by Zinke. Remember, one term in Congress, and no, I don't think there were any investigations of him while he was in Congress. And then a year, 2 years at Interior, and 15 inquiries into alleged misconduct. Ooh, that's a lot. The investigations included one by the Inspector General into Zinke's decision to deny 2 Connecticut tribes a permit to operate a casino, multiple inquiries into his travel expenses and whether he violated agency policy by allowing his wife to ride in government vehicles, and questions about his management of the department, including an investigation into a National Park Service report that removed any reference to climate change. The casino case, which was referred to the Justice Department for potential criminal charges, is still pending. Government investigators ultimately closed most of the other inquiries without reaching a finding that Zinke had violated ethics rules. How nice for him. In other cases, Interior officials refused to cooperate, but the slew of inquiries strained his relationship with the White House, who pressured him to resign when the Whitefish investigation was referred to the Justice Department for a possible criminal investigation. Didn't want to stand by him or anything like that. Goodbye, you're out. Zinke blamed his departure in a private resignation letter on vicious and politically motivated attacks and said that he could not, quote, justify spending thousands of dollars defending myself and my family against false allegations. Okay. He's just going to spend that money defending himself against those allegations while he runs for Congress instead. Zinke touted himself as a Republican in the model of Theodore Roosevelt. But he worked to weaken existing environmental protections and shrink national monuments established by previous presidents, including people like Theodore Roosevelt. Trump scaled back 2 national monuments in Utah, Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante, and Zinke called on him to curtail the boundaries of several others. Zinke voiced suspicions that career staffers at the department were undermining his policies, telling a group of oil and gas executives that a third of Interior employees were disloyal. He abruptly reassigned dozens of senior executives, only for us to find out that he was corrupt the whole time. But whatever. Among the quirks of his tenure, besides the corruption, was his revival of an arcane military ritual that required a security staffer to hoist a special secretarial flag on the roof of the agency's headquarters in downtown Washington whenever he entered the building, like he's the president. When the secretary went home for the day or traveled, the flag, a blue banner emblazoned with the agency's bison seal flanked by 7 white stars representing the interior bureaus, came down. Zinke's official portrait, which hangs at headquarters, shows him riding a horse in front of a tree-covered butte, a scene inspired by a photograph taken of him at Bears Ears, which he then ruined. President Biden restored full protections to the monument and the Grand Staircase Escalante in the fall at the urging of tribal activists and conservationists, which, as you know, is a wild policy swing, and we can't have that something filibuster. Anyway, we're okay with those. And let's see. We can move on from there to, let's see, a few other issues. Oh, I want to note for the record today, as I just checked during the break, the New York Times daily email to me about the coronavirus tracking. And let's see, how are other people doing on this stuff? They track New York City and New York State and the United States, and then at my request, Loudoun County, Virginia. I just want to note for the record that Loudoun County, Virginia, posting the first increase in the number of cases in some time. We've been on the downslope of the end of the Omicron spike, and I think I saw Charles Gaba out there tweeting out close-ups of a little teeny-weeny uptick in some charts, and I think that's what we need to be on the lookout for, that we may be bouncing back up, or we may find that coming down from the Omicron spike, we just leave ourselves at a new plateau, higher than where the plateau was before we entered the spike, but not as high as the spike itself, of course. But interesting and worth noting. And again, we still count as extreme COVID-19 risk if unvaccinated in the area, and extreme transmission in the neighborhood. So good day to have half the kids decide to take their masks off. Anyway, that wasn't what I wanted to jump to next. What was? Well, I'll tell you as soon as I scroll down here. This was another fun thing that I thought I ought to share. AP reporting this. Michael Sisak. Do I have that right? Sisak. Pardoned Kushner pal pleads guilty to cyber stalking charges. An interesting trek through the courts for one of Jared Kushner's friends. A former newspaper editor who received a pardon from former President Donald Trump pleaded guilty Wednesday to state cyber stalking charges in New York in a deal that could eventually see the case dropped. Interesting, why bother? But I guess it was cyber stalking that he was charged with under federal statutes as well. That's what he got the pardon for, and New York said, "Oh, we have a law for that too. We'll charge you." Let's read on. Manhattan prosecutors said they will withdraw Ken Kurson's misdemeanor counts of attempted computer trespass and attempted eavesdropping in a year if he performs 100 hours of community service and stays out of trouble. They wasted a pardon on 100 hours of community service. Kurson, a friend of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, was charged in August with hacking his wife's online accounts and sending threatening, harassing messages to several people amid heated divorce proceedings in 2015. So really like an act close to the Kushner family heart. Kushner's dad was that kind of jerk, And I guess Jared's friends are those kinds of jerks too, and he doesn't recognize that that's disgusting and shouldn't be encouraged. I don't know why. Where were we? Yes, right. So he was Kurson, the editor of the New York Observer when it was owned by Kushner, sometimes monitored his now ex-wife's computer activity from his desk at the newspaper's Manhattan offices, prosecutors said. Surprised he didn't ask for the Department of Homeland Security to do it for him. The state case mirrored the federal case against Kurson that went away when Trump pardoned him in January of 2021. In the final hours of his White House term, presidential pardons apply only to federal crimes, not state offenses. Assistant District Attorney Alana Katz said in court Wednesday that Kurson has gone more than 6 years without reoffending and has taken steps to prevent such behavior, like gaining a conscience or something like that. I don't know where he would buy one. Maybe Amazon Prime. As part of Kurson's plea deal, prosecutors reduced his original felony charges of eavesdropping and computer trespass to misdemeanor attempt charges. If he meets the other terms, prosecutors will exchange those charges for harassment, a low-level offense that's characterized as a violation, not a crime, under state law. A check-in hearing is scheduled for May 18th. A message seeking comment was left with Kurson's lawyer. Kurson of South Orange, New Jersey, no, not far from my own, I guess to the south of my own hometown of West Orange, was the first person in Trump's orbit charged by local prosecutors after being pardoned by the former president, though it's not the first time Manhattan prosecutors have tangled Trump or with Trump, I guess, really, or one of his allies. Last year, the district attorney's years-long criminal investigation into Trump and his business practices led to tax fraud charges against his company and its longtime chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. Both have pleaded not guilty. You know all about this. Manhattan prosecutors previously charged former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort with state crimes in 2019 as a hedge against a possible pardon after he was convicted in federal court over similar mortgage fraud allegations. Trump later pardoned Manafort in the federal case, and the state case was dismissed on double jeopardy grounds, which really shouldn't be the case. New York eased double jeopardy protections in 2019 to ensure state prosecutors could pursue charges against anyone granted a presidential pardon for similar federal crimes. In Kurson's case, double jeopardy wasn't an issue because his federal case ended before a conviction or acquittal. The federal case against Kurson, who now works you'll never believe where he works now. He's not in New York Observer anymore because Kushner doesn't own it. But what do you think? I'm going to give we have an audience here. I should ask the production staff here. Jared Kushner pal, guilty of cyber stalking his wife, his ex-wife, and then gets a pardon from Trump, but ends up having to face the same charges at the state level, he was good friends with Kushner. Kushner made him the editor of his newspaper, but the newspaper is since, gone, sold, I don't know if it went under or whatever. Got his pardon, but now in trouble with the law again, but he's going to start a new career. What's his new career? And the answer is cryptocurrency, because why work, right? When you can just steal money from people and get pardons. Okay, so anyway, the federal case arose from a background check when Trump offered Kurson a seat in 2018 on the board of the National Endowment for the Humanities. And then when they looked into his background, they said, oh my God, he should be charged with cyber stalking, and was. And then Trump pardons him. Why didn't you pardon him earlier, and then you could put him on the board? But I guess it's amazing if you're wondering what's too much for Trump. Although he would have done it for somebody that he really knew personally, but I'm sure he was like, Jared, you idiot, you brought me this guy, he's dirty, he's a criminal, what's wrong with you? So, blaming it on Jared. All right, I mean, rightly so. Anyway, where were we? Oh, yes. In explaining the pardon, they mention here, so Manhattan prosecutors started investigating Kurson for possible violations of state law once Trump pardoned him. They were like, why? We don't have to waste our resources on it. The federal government's got it. Oh, no. Corrupt federal government? Damn. In explaining the pardon, the Trump White House cited a letter from Kurson's ex-wife in which she said she never wanted him investigated or arrested and repeatedly asked for the FBI to drop it. Okay. I believe that. According to Manhattan prosecutors, Kirsten monitored her computer keystrokes in 2015 and 16 using spyware, obtaining passwords, and accessing her Gmail and Facebook accounts. In October of 2015, prosecutors said he accessed and then anonymously disseminated her Facebook messages. Sounds like just the sort of thing that she would say, I really, really, really don't want any help with this. Please don't prosecute him. Okay. According to a criminal complaint, she told police in his New Jersey town that he was, quote, terrorizing her through email and social media, causing her problems at work and in her social life. But please don't do anything, police that I've called to come to my... I mean, come on. Anyway, okay, they should now be investigating them for bullying the wife into writing this letter. But who am I to suggest such a thing? Anyway, let's see. What other fun things can we share with you here today? I'm going to look at all of these possible items here. What's this one? I got to open a... oh, yeah, that's worth noting, I guess. A tweet from Jim Scuto, the CNN anchor and chief national security correspondent, just sort of noting for the record on the Russia-Crimea Ukraine thing. Crimea comes back into it in this tweet. In 2014, he reminds us, Russia sent its forces into Crimea without insignia, right? Not identifying them as Russian forces. Just little green men, as it was referred to then, and denied that they were Russian at all for weeks. Russian forces, meanwhile, remain there 8 years later. Do not take Moscow's withdrawal claims at face value. There were all sorts of claims yesterday, not only withdrawal from the rest of Ukraine, but apparently videos that claimed to be Russian tanks leaving Crimea. And there's no real reason to believe that they're doing that. And instead, by the way, a round of like cyber attacks launched all over Ukraine. And now the news that, oh yeah, they might not be leaving at all and might just launch their attack now that we've published stories saying that they're not going to do it. So, all right. Let's see. A few other items that we could read. How about this one? We can throw in David Dayen's reporting on what Greg mentioned yesterday, the new Republican obstructionism tactic at the committee level. And David pointing out, some of the things that could be done about it, and giving his generally unique take on these things. Oops, let's get rid of the pop-up so we can get to work here, even though the pop-up is probably your opportunity to keep the people at the American Prospect, like David Dayen, working on articles like this one. So we shouldn't ignore it. But I did. Moving on. Senate Republicans unveil tactic to potentially block all Biden nominees. By boycotting committee markups, Republicans could prevent nominees from getting a Senate floor vote. Democrats could change the rules to end this tactic. Why, yes, I guess that they could. Or they could ignore the rules, as we discussed. By the way, I happened to see a report on, flicker by on Twitter about Amy Klobuchar complaining about this practice and others like it as, I guess, nominees for U.S. attorney at various locations around the country were being blocked by Republicans and saying, we didn't block U.S. attorneys en masse just to slow down the Trump appointment process, even though we could have, which I guess was supposed to be a point in her favor, but was just got me to say, well, you should have done that. That's what we wanted you to do. Why did you drop the ball on that? I don't know why we would brag about that. They're never going to return the niceties. It was idiotic of you to get out of the way, if you ask me. All right. So let's see. Here's what David has to say about this deal. An escalation in Republican obstruction of executive branch nominees potentially threatens the ability to get any of the Biden administration's vacant positions filled unless Democrats mount the drive to change Senate rules. Or appoint the nominees. There is always that. The tactic involves Republicans boycotting committee markups, a typically routine procedure in which legislative action gets voted on and nominations get advanced. Because of complicated Senate rules, this makes it effectively impossible to get nominees a vote on the Senate floor, even if the nominee has 50 Senate votes necessary to be confirmed. Senator Pat Toomey, who I thought was retiring already, announced on Tuesday that his party would boycott a scheduled markup for 5 Federal Reserve Board of Governors nominees, including the chair, Jerome Powell, who has been renominated for a second term, and the new vice chair, Lael Brainerd, who currently sits on the board. Sandra Thompson, who has been nominated for the chair of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, was also scheduled for a vote at the markup. Powell, Brainerd, and Thompson are not the targets of the maneuver. How do you like that? Toomey and the Republicans want to block Sarah Bloom Raskin, the wife of Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, and someone who is seen as a strong financial regulator, from becoming the Fed's vice chair for financial supervision, the chief regulatory policy position at the central bank. Raskin has been confirmed twice in the Senate before, including to a previous role as a Federal Reserve governor with unanimous support. But guess what? It's all gone now. Instead of showing up to work to do their job, Republicans have walked out on the American people. Senate Banking Committee Chair Sherrod Brown said in furious opening remarks at the markup, where all the Republican chairs were empty. The ostensible reason for the boycott is the Republican claim that they have not received full information from Raskin, particularly about her alleged role in helping a fintech, financial technology, fintech company lobby a regional Federal Reserve Bank for access to the central bank's payment system. Brown rebutted this, noting that Raskin had answered 180 questions from the committee's Republicans in writing and that her responses were sufficient. Ms. Bloom Raskin has been the subject of an unrelenting smear campaign of malicious character assassinations and innuendo without offering a shred of evidence, Brown said. The committee held an unofficial roll call vote on the nominations. All 12 Democrats, including Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who sits on the committee, voted the nominees to be approved for a full Senate vote, save for one dissenting vote on Powell from Senator Elizabeth Warren. But the vote was unofficial because without any Republicans present, the committee did not have a quorum to move into executive session. Committee rules in general require that at least one member of the opposition party be present to provide a quorum. We have seen several instances during the power sharing agreement in a 50-50 Senate when nominees have come out of committee with a tie. In that case, the Senate can vote to discharge that nominee from committee by majority vote. However, under Senate standing rules, a majority of the committee must be physically present to vote on pending nominations in order for them to get a vote on the floor. So, the discharge process is not available. As long as the standing rules require a majority present, nominees would remain stuck. In today's 50-50 Senate, Democrats are boxed in by the GOP boycott, said Sarah Binder, you know her, professor at GWU, and an expert on Senate rules. Democrats could do a traditional discharge to get a nominee to the floor, but that would require 60 votes under the current rules. And if Republicans are boycotting committee hearings, they are exceedingly unlikely to give the necessary votes to get the nominee out. The bottom line is that under current Senate rules, Republicans committed to obstruction can indefinitely block nominees they don't like. And we know this works because it already has. Last year, Republicans boycotted 5 separate committee markups for the nomination of Dilawar Syed. Dilawar Syed, sounds more like Delaware when I say it that way, to become the top deputy at the Small Business Administration. The reasons for this obstruction shifted over time. Wow, really? From Syed's service on the board of the Muslim organizing group Engage, which Republicans consider anti-Semitic, to the performance of the SBA during the pandemic, which I thought was pretty good, actually. Gave out a lot of money. Whatever the reason, the tactic was successful in keeping Syed out of that slot at the SBA. Eventually, the Biden administration shifted course, and on Tuesday, Syed was announced to a non-confirmable, or no confirmation needed anyway, slot as Special Representative for Commercial and Business Affairs at the State Department. Republicans have been threatening to use the boycott tactic in other committees, like the Senate Commerce Committee, where Gigi Sohn, a nominee to the Federal Communications Commission, and Alvaro Bedoya, a nominee for the Federal Trade Commission, have been lingering. Without those nominees confirmed, Democrats do not have a majority on those 2 crucial commissions. But Toomey's action in the banking committee is the first escalation of boycotts since the successful effort on Syed, and some observers believe this tactic will grow as we near the midterm elections, with Republicans expecting to win back the Senate. That means that there may be a time limit for Democrats to get nominees through. They're trying to waste time until they potentially retake control, said Jeff Hauser, executive director of the Revolving Door Project. During the Trump administration, Democrats did boycott committee hearings for nominees like EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, but this was known to be a symbolic show of opposition. Because Republicans had a clear Senate majority throughout the term, they could get a nominee to the floor anyway by suspending committee rules. The issue here is that in a 50-50 Senate, the rules negotiated between Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell apply, and as currently constructed, they prevent nominees from getting confirmed without a committee quorum advancing them. But the Senate rules can be changed. Some progressive activists are loudly suggesting that the Senate take action to ensure that nominees with majority support can get a vote on the floor. President Biden and Schumer might very well need to work together to change the rules or use recess appointments to push through these critical nominees, said David Siegel, or perhaps Segal, executive director of Demand Progress. Allowing quorum denial to block or delay will lead to ongoing dysfunction and stymie popular initiatives and to push back against corporate power. Abiding these tactics cannot be an option. Siegel highlighted two alternatives. The first would be to use the so-called nuclear option to change the standing rules and allow nominees whose markups didn't get a quorum in committee to advance to a floor vote. The procedure would go like this. Well, you know how it works. Senate moves to vote for, in this case, Federal Reserve nominees. Republican raises a point of order that a majority wasn't physically present. The chair would likely accept that, but Democrats could appeal the ruling and override the chair of the Senate. Of course, they could also simply move to table the point of order, I think. But I'm not positive of that. But I think that's an option that's available to them. And, well, actually, honestly, under the rules, it might require more votes to table a point of order. I'm not certain whether they have that protection built in. But honestly, under the regular constitutional prerogative to set their own rules of proceeding, they can just do that by majority vote too. Oh, do the rules say that? Well, then F those rules too. 50 plus 1 says do it a different way. But okay, that's not discussed here. The chair, right, okay, we have the nuclear option. This, of course, would require all 50 Democrats and Vice President Harris to agree and effectively set a new precedent. As Binder described it, that precedent would be a majority does not have to be physically present in order to make a committee quorum when the panel is evenly split. With Senator Ben Ray Lujan still recovering from stroke and brain surgery, Democrats only have 49 votes at the moment in the Senate. Lujan's return is expected in a matter of weeks, but there's no certainty that the likes of Sinema or Manchin will vote to change the rules. It's notable that Sinema voted for the Federal Reserve nominees, but that doesn't necessarily translate to overriding their rules on the floor. This strikes me as a high hurdle for this Senate majority, Binder said, and I think I agree. Manchin and Sinema may also want guarantees on the type of nominees Biden would bring forward in exchange for changing the rules. Senate leadership has no plans to seek rules change at this time, preferring to see how the Toomey situation plays out. Oh, so fun. There's a belief that obstructing high-profile Federal Reserve nominees right when inflation is the top political issue, I'm already laughing, given how those nominees will play a central role in managing interest rates in an attempt to tamp down inflation, might backfire politically on Republicans. Nah, I don't think so. I hear Republicans every day talk about inflation, said Senator John Tester at the boycotted markup. What group is out there, there we go, to deal with market forces better than anyone? The Fed. But Republicans are not showing up to do the constitutional duty they were elected to do. Oh, it's working great already. I see them showing up now. Embarrassed. The second option, without changes to the rules, would be to make recess appointments for the Fed positions and any others that Republicans might obstruct. With Democrats in control of both chambers, they could adjourn and give President Biden the time to make the recess appointments. Under the Constitution, those recess appointments would last until the end of the next legislative session. That would translate to the end of 2023. Not bad. Each Congress has, we'll explain it to you. Each Congress has 2 legislative sessions, one for each year. We are in the 2022 session now, so the next session would be 2023. Advocates believe that some action must be taken, looking ahead to how Republicans may capitalize on the momentum of blocking nominees to do blanket obstruction if they retake the Senate. The Senate is way behind dealing with nominations already, said Hauser. The longer they take to fight, the longer before GOP intransigence looks unreasonable. And golly, will it ever? I don't know. I mean, I'm asking that. Not like, oh boy, will it ever? No. Will it ever actually begin to look unreasonable? Will people actually, wake up in the morning, stretch, oh, what time is it? What's on my agenda for today? And God damn it, if those guys at the Fed haven't been nominated yet, I am going to be pissed. I don't see it happening, but maybe you do. All right, your mileage may vary. Okay, I will have to make a note to myself, one, to decide whether or not to bleep Greg saying a-hole earlier today. That's on my agenda. We'll be back Friday. I can discuss what I decided to do with that if you want. And, of course, I got to dig up that tweet about Amy Klobuchar so I can prove it to you, and we can figure out exactly what we were talking about. That gives us Friday to talk about that if it's a hot story. There's plenty more buried here in pocket. Plenty more I'm sure will happen today. I can tell you that tomorrow the first day of optional masks went at the local high school. But in the meantime, what you're really waiting for is to find out all the stories we didn't get to cover here today and what Justice Putnam has to say about them. And that's coming next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. How about a little preview? West Virginia's only black female lawmaker has filed suit against an anti-abortion group over racist threats. It's got a little bit of everything, like Lethal Weapon 3 here. The Biden administration granted loan relief to students misled by for-profit DeVry University. Okay, that's a foot in the door. Nice.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And he's got the story about the Kushner pal, too. Wait for his angle on that one coming up next. Then, let's see, a job advertisement for 30 women train drivers in Saudi Arabia. It's got 28,000 applicants. That and much more from around the country and around the world. But how about that? Train news from Saudi Arabia next.